Esfandiari School of Journalism, welcome to Global Journalist. I'm David Reed. Diplomatic distress over Iran's nuclear program is reaching a fever pitch. The latest escalation began when the UN's nuclear watchdog announced that its mission in Iran had failed. The regime was unwilling to offer full access to its nuclear sites so inspectors could determine whether Iran is really trying to develop nuclear weapons. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu indicated this month that Israel will engage in a preemptive military strike as soon as it believes Iran has the capability to build a nuclear weapon. Last week, Netanyahu came to the White House, where President Obama urged him to give diplomacy and economic sanctions a chance to work before resorting to military action. However, Obama also made it clear that the military option remains on the table. Our guests today are veteran journalists who will put this confrontation in perspective and share the viewpoints of people living in Iran and Israel, from the leaders to the ordinary citizens. Golnaz Esfandiari is from Iran and for many years was the chief editor of Radio Farda, Radio Free Europe's Persian language service. Golnaz is now a senior correspondent for RFE and editor of the Persian Letters blog. Jay Bushinsky has been reporting from Israel for more than 40 years. Jay is the Israel correspondent for WBBM in Chicago and writes a weekly column for the Jerusalem Post. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, you're welcome. To bring us up to date, Obama met with British Prime Minister David Cameron on Wednesday, and the president called for Iran to re-enter international arms talks in good faith. But he also said the window for solving this issue diplomatically is shrinking. Ari Shavat, a senior correspondent at Haaretz newspaper, wrote a column today that an Iran attack is the toughest question Israel has faced since 1948. And Jay, you've covered most of the major events that have shaped the current conditions, the Israel's Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, the Iranian Revolution, and the First Gulf War. How serious is the current confrontation?
It's very, very serious, David, because the Iranian leaders, especially the Ayatollah Khamenei and President, I believe he is, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, spoke about wiping Israel off the face of the earth, or off the map, whichever expression they preferred. And that's touching the rawest nerve possible in this Jewish state. In other words, mass murder, genocide, and it immediately puts the Jewish people here on the alert against what happened in the 1940s, when 6 million Jews were indeed annihilated by the Nazis. So they're treading on very dangerous ground, and Prime Minister Netanyahu, as you said, has been weighing the pros and cons of a preemptive strike to eliminate this Iranian threat.
Okay, and now the Atlantic magazine has set up a system that analyzes the probability that the United States or Israel will strike Iran in the next year. It's called the Iran War Clock, and the chance has risen to nearly 50%. As one of the experts polled by the Atlantic, are we really on the threshold of a military conflict? This is for Golnaz. Yeah.
I think the chances of the conflict with Iran are very high. Israel seems to determine not to be ready to live with a nuclear Iran. But I think for now, at least in the next few weeks, the probability of a military strike has been contained. As you know, Iran and the 5 permanent members of the Security Council plus Germany have decided that they're going to go back to the negotiation table. And I think these talks are going to take place sometimes in April. It seems it's going to be in Turkey again, in Istanbul. So we have to see what those talks are going to bring. But there are signs that Iran, is making some sort of compromise. Last week, there was news that Iran's Supreme Court ordered the retrial of a former U.S. Marine who had been sentenced to death in Iran after being convicted of spying. And also, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, had a very rare praise for President Obama, for Obama talking about the danger of war. So, as I said, we have to wait and see.
Okay, let's talk a bit about what the everyday people are thinking now. Now, nearly 3 out of 4 Americans oppose a military strike by Israel on Iran's nuclear program, according to a poll by the Program on International Policy Attitudes. Jay, what do the majority of Israelis think about the military option?
They believe that if the leadership here deems it necessary, and if their decision is based upon valid intelligence, and one must bear in mind the fact that Israel has its own capability in the field of finding out what's really going on in Iran from the Mossad, the equivalent of CIA, their calculation would be made accordingly. They will not wait for somebody to say, okay, do it now, or for someone to tell them, yes, Iran is about to blow up its first nuclear device. If they see that this is really on the verge of happening, Israel definitely will act alone.
I listened to a recent exchange of yours with a former Israeli defense minister, and on this televised talk show, he insisted that the Israeli Air Force has the capability on its own to effectively hit underground nuclear facilities in Iran, but yet intelligence sources have leaked information that that's really not the case. And then President Obama recently said about this issue that, quote, "I don't bluff." Was the former defense minister bluffing when he said that?
No,
when he said
I
this?
don't think so. The former defense minister is Moshe Arens, who was born in Latvia, lived in the United States until after World War II, and then came to Israel and entered politics and became defense minister eventually. He's a very cool, calculating individual, very open-minded, and he told me personally that there's no doubt that the Israeli Air Force can eliminate the Iranian nuclear sites if necessary. His only reservation was, what will happen then? Will it just be a matter of delaying the advent of the nuclear bomb, or will it eliminate the possibility forever? If it doesn't eliminate the possibility forever, then the question comes up, is that the way to go?
Right. So you're saying that Israel is not exaggerating its capabilities?
Not at all, and it's not dependent on anybody to act in whatever way it deems necessary. It doesn't need the okay from the United States, and it doesn't need intelligence from the United States or any other power in the world.
Let's talk a bit about sanctions. Now, the Financial Times reports that Iran's oil production has fallen to a 10-year low, and analysts say production could drop to levels last seen during the Iran-Iraq War in 1980s. And the sanctions are really disrupting the industry, which Iran depends on. Golnaz, what impact are the sanctions having in Iran, and will things get significantly worse after the EU oil embargo begins this summer?
Sanctions are seriously hurting the Iranian economy, and people can feel it. The people in the street, it's affecting people's day-to-day life, which is a great concern for many. The prices of food stuff is soaring. For example, I think the price of rice, which is one of the main dishes of Iranians, has doubled in recent months. The price of meat has tripled. It's getting very difficult for people to get foreign medications. I was talking to a woman in Iran who said that she can't afford to buy vitamins anymore because they're so expensive. And it's, people are getting ready for harder days to come when the EU sanctions come into force. I think in June or July, things are going to get worse.
And does the leadership care? Will it have an impact on their policies regarding the nuclear watchdog agencies and how much access they give?
It's difficult to say. I think the general consensus between experts is that the sanctions are hurting Iran, but it doesn't mean that Iran is going to change course. But the other thing is that Iran's nuclear negotiator has written to Catherine Ashton, the EU foreign policy chief, saying that Iran is ready for talks without any preconditions, which was, before they would always come to the negotiation table, but they would have preconditions. we have to see. I don't really think it's going to affect the leadership that much.
Okay, and I know you with your blog, you're in touch with a lot of people from inside Iran. Has the regime's control of information had a big impact on what Iranians think about the nuclear program?
I think it does, because the regime has launched this huge campaign for years now, trying to say that the nuclear issue is the most important thing and that everybody is united in that. So it is having an impact, but we're also hearing mixed feeling or reactions from people to the nuclear program. There are, of course, many Iranians, there are no opinion polls, but those we talk to, many of them believe that Iran has a right to a nuclear program, a peaceful nuclear program. We've heard also from some saying that Iran even should produce a nuclear bomb because it lives in a region where there are several countries, Pakistan, India, that have nuclear weapons, and Iran should have it for its defense purposes. You have also other people who believe that it's not worth the sanctions, the pressure, the isolation Iran is facing right now. So I think there are mixed feelings about the nuclear program.
Right.
But I don't think that claim by the government is right, that everybody is for the nuclear program and that they're all ready to pay the highest price for it. Okay,
and Jay, in Israel, has the news media given balanced coverage of this issue, and or are people kind of getting in a war fever and becoming patriotic? And tell me about.
No. The media here, the Israeli news media, especially the Hebrew language news media, has been very professional about it, very balanced and responsible, and there's been no whooping up the patriotism or chauvinism that you can encounter when countries are about to enter into a confrontation with other countries. It's a pretty level-headed situation, but the biggest problem is that it's a matter of intelligence, calculation at the highest level, and the ultimate decision rests with really one man, namely Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and everybody is leaving it to him to decide on the basis of what he deems credible information, and assume that if he thinks that the time has come to eliminate the Iranian nuclear capability in the field of armaments, not in the field of normal use for civilian purposes, but for armaments, then Netanyahu may decide that he's got to go all the way. And he said he would rather see Tel Aviv being hit by Iranian missiles than have to live side by side with a nuclear Iran. So that indicates that his degree of flexibility is very limited.
Well, now, but U.S. intelligence analysts claim there is no proof that Iran is pursuing a nuclear weapons program, and their recent assessments by the spy agencies are broadly consistent with the 2007 intelligence finding.
But for Israel, this is an existential issue. It's a life and death issue, and they don't necessarily take the opinion or the evaluation of another power, even the United States, as being the ultimate judgment. And if the United States doesn't think that it's that dangerous, and the Israeli establishment in the field of intelligence thinks that it is that dangerous, they will go along with their own calculation, and they have the means in their equivalent of the CIA to make their own independent judgments.
I think even if Iran obtains or produces nuclear weapons, it doesn't matter, it's going to attack Israel. I don't think the Iranian regime is suicidal. The Iranian regime is a threat to its own people, but it's really those people who are now in power in Iran, they would do anything to stay in power, and they wouldn't take any actions that would jeopardize basically their existence.
Well, that's a very logical and sensible assumption. But the Israelis don't want to take any chances that, for one reason or another, the Iranian leadership might be tempted to go ahead and use their capability, especially because of what was learned in the periods of the 1930s and 1940s, when people heard Adolf Hitler talk about annihilating the Jews, and when the United States sided with Great Britain in World War II. He said that the Jews would pay for it, and they did. And so the conclusion here is that when totalitarian leaders talk about genocide, you've got to take them at their word and not take any chances of other than to be ready to prevent their having a genocidal capability.
The problem is that most experts agree that they don't think even a military strike is going to end Iran's nuclear program. Some of Iran's sites are underground, and it doesn't seem that Israel can destroy all of them. And look what happened when Israel attacked the Osirak nuclear facility in Iraq in 1981, I think it was. It didn't put an end to Iraq's desire to have a nuclear program. And unfortunately, that might be the case with Iran. Iran could be even more determined to produce nuclear weapons.
Yes, but Iraq's nuclear program, for all intents and purposes, was finished after they took care of that Iraq reactor.
But we learned that afterward, right? So, are people failing to consider why Iran might not want to bomb? That they'll realize they might be better off without nuclear weapons capability? Because Khamenei has repeatedly said that nuclear weapons are contrary to Islam. And
Ayatollah Khamenei had apparently issued a fatwa in 1995, and I think it was last week when he reiterated his view that producing nuclear weapons is against Islam, and other Iranian officials have said so. And also, as you mentioned, the U.S. officials and also many experts seem to believe that Iran has not made a decision to produce nuclear weapons. It seems that they want to have the capability to be able to produce nuclear weapons whenever they would need to, but they haven't reached a decision yet. So I think that's very important.
Now, how confident are people in the Israeli intelligence? Because in the U.S., we're still feel a bit burned by what happened in Iraq. The intelligence problems. Is it possible that the Israeli intelligence could have it wrong and do a strike when they don't need to?
The confidence in the intelligence here is total, and the assumption that if somebody like former Defense Minister Moshe Arendt says that the Israeli Air Force has the capability with all that entails, including the type of bombs that can go through heavily concrete fortifications, then they believe that that's the case and that it's true. And as I said earlier, the only question is what will happen afterwards. Will it simply delay Iran's effort, or will it put an end to it? And that's the decision they've got to make.
Okay. Now,
if the Iranians want this thing to cool down, why don't they just let the International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors visit the sites and report accordingly? Last time they went to Iran, those inspectors were not allowed to visit certain facilities.
Well, now Iran has said it would allow the inspectors to visit the Parchin facility, which was one of the ones they were not allowed to visit. So we have to see, as I said, there are signs that Iran is ready for a compromise because of the sanctions, because of the pressure they're facing.
Okay. Now, let me just take a break here now. Before we continue our discussion, I want to remind everyone that you can view or listen to this program anytime by downloading our podcasts at globaljournalist.org. You can also find interesting articles, photos, and interviews related to today's program on our website. So please send us questions or comments via globaljournalist@kbia.org or our Facebook page. I want to get a little bit of politics in Iran. Can you give us, Golnaz, some insight into what's going on? What are the dynamics now? I understand there's some internal struggles, and Ahmadinejad is lost a bit of his power, and how that affects the current conditions.
Well, Ahmadinejad has been engaged in a power struggle with the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, and as a result, he has been isolated, and as you said, he's been weakened. Iran had parliamentary election earlier this month, and according to the result, it seems that it was another blow to Ahmadinejad. Although we have to wait for the second round and for the final result to see exactly how hard he was hit. Ahmadinejad also appeared at the parliament yesterday. It was unprecedented. They had summoned him. The parliament had summoned him for questioning, but he had his own style. He basically responded to the questions with jokes, and he dismissed most of the questions. That made some of the lawmakers very angry. But I don't think at this point there's any appetite in Iran, on the part of the supreme leader to dismiss Ahmadinejad or to let the parliament go ahead and impeach him. I think it seems that they want him to end his term in 2013.
Jay, what is your perspective on the internal struggles in Iran and how that affects the nuclear issue?
Well, having covered the revolution back in 1978 and 1979, my impression was quite favorable because there were many idealistic Iranians who pinned great hopes on the overthrow of the Shah and what they thought would be the introduction of democracy in Iran. But it didn't happen. The revolution fell into the hands of the religious extremists, and we've seen what kind of a country Iran became under their leadership. First the Ayatollah Khomeini, now the Ayatollah Khamenei, and there is no opposition that they recognize as being entitled to take power as an alternative. So the assumption here is that Iran's future depends upon its own people, and the possibility that the people of Iran, who are not hostile to the Israelis by any means, may find an opportunity to liberate themselves from this theocratic regime, which is not that popular, certainly not as popular as the regime would like people to think it is.
Now, Golnaz, let's talk a bit about the state's repression on the media and what's happening with access to information in Iran. I understand there's going to be a further crackdown on internet access.
Yes, we witnessed some internet disruptions before the parliamentary votes. Iran does that usually to sort of block the calls for boycotting the election. It did that also during the presidential election, just because it didn't want people to send out information or inform others about what was happening. Iran is now working, Iranian officials have said that they're working on a national internet, and they've promised that it will be launched either in May or June. That could lead to even greater internet censorship. Iran is now, like China, it has one of the toughest internet censorship in the world. Tens of thousands of websites are blocked in Iran. These include websites, social media such as Facebook, which is very popular in Iran. Our website is blocked in Iran, and other websites that are deemed either immoral or against Iran's national security. So I guess with the launch of the national internet, it seems that the way Iran is going is to control the internet as much as possible, and they want to have probably the national internet. They want to create their own website where people can go to, and it's going to be fast, and they're going to keep the access to the World Wide Web very limited and extremely slow. It is very slow currently,
right?
Even slower.
I thought a recent blog entry of yours was told us a lot about the resiliency of the Iranian people and the ability of information to get through. You wrote in your blog, you heard from a woman in Tehran whose satellite dish was demolished by the police several months ago. She told Persian Letters that the first thing she did the day after her apartment complex was raided was order a new dish and receiver. She said, quote, "That's the only fun we have here. There's nothing worth watching on state television. They can come and take my dish away. I'll get a new one." That does. So I guess this cat and mouse game between the state and the people about trying to control information doesn't always work.
It doesn't. It's getting very difficult for Iran to control the free flow of information. Iranians access satellite channels, and that's where they get some of their information. They listen to our radio, to other radios that are being aired from outside the country. and through the internet. But Iran, but they have to use proxy service to get to banned websites. So as you said, it is a cat and mouse game, and unfortunately, in some cases, it seems that the government has the upper hand because they have lots of resources. They're spending millions of dollars to block, to jam our radio, to block satellite channels, and they raid people's houses, they demolish their satellite dishes, and they find them. But, lots of people are resilient, and as that woman told me the next day, the first thing she did the next day was to buy a new receiver, a new satellite dish.
Interesting. And Jay, we only have about a minute left, but I wanted to ask you about how Israelis are using humor to vent their anxiety about the nuclear Iran.
Well, they live on the principle of never again, which refers to what happened in the Holocaust when 6 million Jews were exterminated by the Nazis. And Prime Minister Netanyahu picked up that slogan, never again, and applied it to the situation vis-a-vis Iran. So the people here expect that whatever may be necessary to prevent Iran from having the nuclear weapons capability will be done.
Okay. Well, we've come to the end of this week's edition of Global Journalist, produced by the Reynolds Journalism Institute and the Missouri School of Journalism. Joining us today were foreign correspondents Golnaz Esfandiari and Jay Bushinsky. I thought that this conversation was very enlightening. I learned a lot, and I think our listeners did as well. I really appreciate you two taking your time and giving us your insights on this issue.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Global Journalist is directed by Travis McMillan, audio by Pat Akers. Raymond Tungakar is our executive producer. Donovan Ferguson was our lead producer, assisted by John McClure and Allison Pasek. Now stay with us for Free Press Watch, and join us again next week for another Global Journalist. I'm David Reed.
And now, Free Press Watch, a segment on Global Journalist where each week we bring a rundown of major events affecting press freedom around the world. I'm Lainey Mullen. Today's news comes from Reporters Without Borders, Reuters, and The Washington Post. 4 Turkish journalists were released from prison last week. Investigative journalists Nedim Şener and Ahmet Şik had been arrested 1 year earlier on charges of supporting an alleged coup plot. Their next hearing is scheduled for June. In Montenegro last week, an investigative reporter was attacked outside of her home. She was hit over the head but received no serious injuries. Journalists at her newspaper, the Daily Vijesti, have been receiving threats for months. No attacker was found. The Senate of Mexico has passed an amendment to make crimes against freedom of expression and the right to information federal offenses. If approved by at least 17 of 31 state legislators and signed by the president, the laws will enable better prosecution for crimes against journalists. According to the Inter-American Press Association, 84 journalists have been killed in Mexico since 1987, and 19 have gone missing. For more information on these and other events affecting press freedom around the world, please visit our website at globaljournalist.org. Thank you for joining us this week on Global Journalist. I'm Lainey Mullen. See you next week.